This is IAQ Radio, Indoor Air Quality Radio, the voice of the indoor air quality industry, with your hosts, Radio Joe Hughes and the Z-Man, Cliff Zlotnick. And now, Radio Joe Hughes.
Good day and welcome to IAQ Radio Plus. The Z-Man is back from the Cleaning Industry Research Institute conference at the Miami of Ohio University. We've also got the executive director of CIRI, John Downey, joining us. Looking forward to, I think it's a great opportunity for listeners to get a quick rundown of the various presentations at the CIRI conference and get some highlights and key points from both Cliff and John. So before we do that, let's thank our marquee sponsor.
IAQ Radio Platinum sponsor is John Downey Products, where restoration and abatement contractors shop. Visit them at jondon.com. That's JONDON.com.
I also want to thank our gold sponsors, Particles Plus, Healthy Indoors Magazine, Gray Wolf Sensing Solutions, and AEML Inc. Laboratory. And of course, our association sponsors, CIRI, the Cleaning Industry Research Institute, the Indoor Air Quality Association, and the Restoration Industry Association.
And now you can win a cool prize. It's time for the IAQ Radio Trivia question. Be the first to correctly answer. Simply email your answer to czlotnick@cs.com. Or if listening live, just text your answer from your computer. And now, here's the Z-Man with this week's IAQ Radio Trivia question.
Hello, everyone. Congratulations go out to John Lapotaire, Indoor Air Quality Solutions, Orlando, Florida, who was first to identify Kevin McCarty as Florida's first Director of the Office of Insurance Regulation. The IQ Radio Trivia question for today, Friday, July 19, 2019, has been sponsored by Ideas, the solution chemistry company providing unique solutions to odor removal, surface cleaning, and decontamination problems. Here's today's trivia question. Name the publisher whose idea it was to have a cleaning research organization which resulted in the founding of CIRI. Back to you, Joe.
Thank you, Cliff. I think most listeners know John Downey. John is the founder of the original, I think it was Cleanfax, and then he has been in the industry doing some things such as editor of the IICRC Journal, and now he's the executive director of the Cleaning Industry Research Institute. They just had their conference this week at the Miami of Ohio University, and I heard great things. I want to welcome John. And John, do we have you on the line?
Sure do. Hi, Joe.
Welcome, John. John, first let's start with the CIRI perspective. What is CIRI's role in the industry?
Well, CIRI is the industry's only nonprofit that is a C3 nonprofit. Well, I keep looking at my face really big in the screen in it. CIRI is the industry's only C3 type of nonprofit dedicated to doing research and promulgating or publicizing or communicating science to the industry. CIRI does, basically our clients, if you will, there are three primary classes of clients for CIRI. The first is scientists and researchers, those who develop the science and do the research. The second primary class of membership are trainers and instructors, those people who really need to be up to date on the research, on the science in order to communicate it within the industry. And then the third class is, and this may seem a little bit unusual or odd initially, but it's trade associations, because CIRI is able to provide to trade associations information that they are not able to get otherwise. I apologize. I'm home and there's dogs barking. Of course, it always happens that way. So CIRI aspires to work with trade associations. We don't have any trade associations as members yet, although we are talking to some. And we feel as though that is the most effective way for CIRI to reach the industry overall with science and research is basically with the associations as a conduit to their members. So we will be providing to the associations unique benefits that they can pass along to the people that are their members.
All right, let's turn it over to the Z-Man. I wondered if you could describe and contrast the format of this week's CIRI conference with other conferences and meetings you've attended over the years.
Well, I think most other meetings, typically have presentations that might go several hours in length, down to some which might go, a half hour or 45 minutes or an hour. I think what was very unique about this was that it was almost like a shotgun approach where the event was divided into sessions that had a common topic or common topics of things that kind of joined the speakers, and every speaker was limited to somewhere between 12 and 15 minutes. They were asked to complete everything within 15 minutes, and there were no questions until after every presenter had presented, and then there was a coordinated question and answer session done by a moderator, and the moderators did really a great job. They were very well prepared and handled it real well. John may want to add something to my comment.
John?
Actually, Cliff did that really well, and from my perspective, especially with Steve Spivak, who developed this particular process within the industry. It's called lightning presentations, and Steve attended a conference, I believe it was about a year ago, where it was lightning presentations that were used, and he found it not only very informative, but kind of lively compared to a lot of technical conferences. And I think we can all appreciate, especially when we're looking at science and research that can be pretty dry. You don't have a lot of motivational speakers that are talking about charts and graphs and different measuring devices, different measuring methods and things like that. So longer presentations are more difficult unless you have people that are super interested in that particular information. So the lightning process for speakers is designed to really get people who are the speakers very narrowly focused on a particular area and a subject area, and then being very tightly focused, they present 10, 15 minutes worth of information in a very concise way. And the benefit of the Q&A afterwards is then the people in the audience can basically help the speaker and illuminate everybody in key areas that maybe he did not have a chance, or she did not have a chance to get into deeply in the initial presentation, but that they have an interest in further exploration during the Q&A session. So it's a unique process. We tried it. We did not know how well it would be received or how well it would go over. And I, for one, and it's good to hear what Cliff had to say, and we got a lot of very positive comments at the conference. It seemed to go over extremely well. It seemed to come together really well. The information that the different presenters had, and there were 6 sessions, each with a general theme. And then, but within those 6 sessions, there were either 3 or 4 individual presentations. And those 3 or 4 individual presentations, frankly, they weren't coordinated. They were presentations that we solicited, and we were working with the individual presenters, but we weren't sure exactly how well they would, what's the word I'm looking for?
Mash together.
Yeah, sync and work together. And our hope was everything would work reasonably well, and I feel like from the feedback that we got, it really worked very well. It was, to my mind, pretty amazing how coordinated, how much more coordinated they seemed to be than they actually were.
Okay. Well, let's get into some detail on the different presentations. I want to start with the keynote called Old Friends, New Threats, Biofilms, and Now Come the Superbugs by Greg Whiteley. Let's start with you, Cliff. Can you give us a little rundown on your key points from that presentation?
Yeah, I had some really good takeaways from that. He's an excellent speaker, and he's 3rd generation in the chemical manufacturing business. Well, my takeaways are as follows. Soil and biofilms are not the same thing. Biofilms, a constructed community of bacteria. Bacteria communicate within biofilms. Enzyme cleaners, the dominant product used in medical cleaning for cleaning things like endoscopes and so on and so forth, do not remove deeper bacterial colonization. Biofilms can't be easily wiped away. Genetic tracing and tracking, this is very interesting, is going to open up litigation in the future, because with today's technology, you can actually take someone and go back and determine where the infection, where they caught the infection. Also, he was talking about endoscopes, about how hard they are to clean. And it was interesting. I ran into an old friend, a fellow by the name of Joe Arrigo, who I've known in the industry for probably 25 plus years. I just hadn't seen him in a while. And we were talking, and we had breakfast together one morning, and he actually told me that what Greg Whiteley, Dr. Whiteley, had described happening had actually happened to him with an endoscope. He ended up getting nicked during the procedure. He ended up becoming very, very ill for a very, very long time. And it was exactly what Greg told us was going to happen, and he experienced it firsthand. So perhaps John has some additional takeaways from it.
John?
Really, a couple things. A few preliminary comments more about all the presentations. I'm probably not the best one to with takeaways from the presentations, because I was so busy at the conference trying to make sure everything was going smoothly that I'm not sure how, I was there for all but one of the presentations, but I wasn't always that focused. However, I do have a little bit of a takeaway from, I would say, all of them. But sometimes I'm going to be talking less about the details of the presentation than of the presenter or the atmosphere surrounding the presentation. As far as with Greg's presentation, a couple of things that I kind of knew this ahead of time that I wanted to mention. One is Greg is a unique individual in our industry in that he owns a manufacturing company, and he's also a PhD level scientist and researcher who believes strongly in sharing research. And his presentation was based on research that he has done and others have done. His theory, and it's one that I so agree with, but unfortunately find so unusual in the cleaning and restoration industry is that, you know what, we all benefit from gathering good data and sharing that good data. And he trusts that his company will be able to use that data to develop effective products. And he's not worried about, keeping things closely held and with the threat of other companies using the information he develops against them. He just doesn't worry about it. And his company has been it's small, relatively speaking, but it's extremely successful in his area of expertise. And which leads to the second thing is Greg's company, most of their products and most of his research is in the area of cleaning and disinfection related to hospitals and other healthcare facilities. So, what he really focuses on, and when we're talking about endoscopes, I think that's one great indicator. And he was also he talked a lot about biofilms and the difficulty in effective cleaning as a consequence of the tenacity of biofilms in protecting various types of contagions. So, another thing that I picked up was you were talking, Cliff, about the litigation that we can expect before too long in that area. He was also talking about some specific new or newer bugs that are, and they're always coming. There are always newer bugs that are threats to human health. And he described some that are here now, and we haven't really heard much about them yet, but we're going to.
Okay. All right. That's, I like what you're saying, though, about him being open with his information. Just a quick little anecdote. We get requests all the time for people to come on the show. Cliff and I just recently got one from a manufacturer of a disinfecting product. And when we asked them for the, for information about their, what they'd applied for as far as patents and what the, what the contents were of the product, they were very reluctant. In fact, they wouldn't tell us anything without signing a non-disclosure agreement. So it doesn't make sense to me, John. If you got a great product, I agree with Dr. Whiteley. Let the world know and let them know how it works and why it works, and we'll be happy to talk about it. But anyway, let's go over to the next session, which was threats to human health, infection control, pathogens, exposure, and the human microbiome. The first speaker there, I believe, was Richard Shaughnessy, Dr. Shaughnessy, who's been on the show a couple times, a friend of the show. Cliff, thoughts on that presentation?
Yep. I think, Joe, you and I know, and I think John knows that Dr. Shaughnessy married a woman from Scandinavia, and I think that she changed his life in many, many ways. And because he's traveled there and has family there, what he's learned is that Scandinavia actually, when compared to other parts of the world, has a culture of clean. They take cleanliness. It's a very, very serious issue there. He said historically ashtrays ventilation rates in the U.S. have been based on odor control reasons, not anything else. He's done some studies and found that increasing outdoor air increases student performance in schools. He's done a lot of work in schools, and Dr. Shaughnessy and CIRI actually did a program in conjunction with the ISSA on ATP testing and determining cleanliness in schools. He said that opening windows doesn't always provide fresh air, and he just showed some examples of what's outside the window. It may be a dumpster or something else that may be unhealthful. He said that surfaces in schools re-equilibrate the microbial load within 2 days after cleaning. So whatever the load is before cleaning, within 2 days, it's going to be back to what it was like before. And he also emphasized the importance of teachers participating in maintaining cleanliness in schools, and that how that helps improve student performance. So we could go over to John. Perhaps he has comments on Dr. Shaughnessy and what he had to say, or him personally, etc.
John, anything you'd like to add?
Well, just one thing. He wasn't able to talk too much about it, but I am aware that he is working on a school study now where their focus is frankly on classroom desks and desktops.
Mm-hmm.
And specifically, they're looking at if you are more effectively clean them, not only can you test and verify that they are cleaner, but will the question that they're asking and hoping to answer is, will it have a measurable effect on attendance rates? Will children get sick less often? Will they be in school more often if we have more effective cleaning? And they identified, it's not the only area, as Cliff mentioned, indoor air and ventilation rates are huge. But in terms of surfaces, they have identified the desktops as a key area, and so that's what they're measuring. So I believe that is actually, I know it's an ongoing study. They do not have, they have, and they don't, I wouldn't even say they have preliminary results. They have enough information that they were given the go-ahead to move forward, on a deeper level. And they are also doing the study in different parts of the country. I believe what Richard is working on, Gene Cole is also working on somewhere on the East Coast as well.
All right. Let's move on to Andrew Meyer.
Right, Dr. Meyer. What he reported was that in the media, and I've read this myself, I've heard this myself, that cleaning products used indoors make people sick, and that cleaning processes make people sick. And this could potentially be fake news. The fact that it's in the media doesn't necessarily mean that it's true. And what he stressed is we don't know if it's the products that make people sick that they react to, if it's the processes that people react to, or if it's the cleanliness, the things are too clean, and the fact that people, the fact that young people aren't exposed to soils and some of the beneficial things that may be in soils. So this cleanliness phenomenon. He talked about a study that was done by healthcare workers, and they took the healthcare workers, they gave them a couple of products, one that contained ammonia, another one which contained acetic acid. People might know that better as white vinegar, and we're trying to determine, because both those products can be irritants, and they studied them, and they really didn't find that they irritated people. So I guess his bottom line was we really don't know whether it's the products, the processes, or the cleaning hypothesis that are causing increases in asthma rates.
While you're talking about that, I'm just thinking they're also cleaning things that need cleaned, so they're exposed while they're cleaning to various bacteria and fungi and viruses, etc. So I think we've got a little way to go on that one. Let's skip on down to David Harry. Unless, John, did you have something you wanted to add there?
Just a couple things very quickly. One is it seemed like a lot of the work that Dr. Mayer was working on is related to asthma, so he's kind of focusing on that particular area. And the other thing is, and this is kind of, I'm going to pat us on the back, is he's somebody that we really have not traditionally known in the industry. he came to us through our efforts, our outreach to some of the universities around Miami and Ohio. I think he actually is a scientist affiliated with the University of Cincinnati. And as a consequence, something I'm kind of proud of is that we're able to bring in some people like him and get them involved in better understanding the cleaning industry. And he spoke to me at the end of the conference and let me know how much he appreciated doing it and that he really wants to become more involved. He can see a whole different area of collaboration for him and other scientists. So as we expand our reach into the science community, I think we're going to be able to provide better information into the cleaning and restoration remediation industries.
All right, that's an interesting addition there. Let's move over to David Harry. Cliff, do you want to give us some thoughts on his?
Sure. I never knew this, but the mop or the string mop that is commonly used was invented in 1893, and it started falling out of favor in around 2002. And the modern standard operating procedure for mopping floors, for instance, in a hospital or school, etc., was to put 3 gallons of cleaning solution in a bucket and mop 3 rooms with it. And one of the things that he said is that the same procedure was used in schools and in hospitals. And, we look at our body and, the skin is the biggest organ in our body. What he said was in a hospital, the floor is the biggest organism in the hospital. And that floors have both transient and resident bacteria, the bacteria that's commonly found there. And then they have transient bacteria that's tracked in by people. He said that there was a study at a Cleveland hospital that showed 44%, and this is scary, of hospital rooms have resident C. diff. He said that 85% of non-slip socks, when you go into a hospital, they give you these socks so you're not going to slip. And they did some testing of these socks, and that they had VRE, which is a antibiotic resistant bacteria, were found in 85% of these socks. He said that they found MRSA in 90% of these socks. Wow. He said that mops can maintain microbial contamination after commercial laundering, and that they use something that's called microfiber, which is a synthetic material, and that these microfiber mops have to be cleaned in a separate process. And because they're plastic derivatives, they can melt at temperatures and they can entwine with themselves and so on and so forth. The bottom line is his opinion on these is that mops shouldn't be used. The replacement that they should use is a microfiber mop. It's more of a pad, and that they should be disposed of after each use. And they actually did a study from cradle to grave and found that throwing away or disposing of these microfiber pads after a single use was actually better for the environment than using and washing mops. So John may have some comments on David Harry and his presentation.
John?
Yeah, just real quick. The one thing that I picked up that stuck with me is that what he said was with microfiber, they are extremely effective at capturing soils and contaminants. And that's because they are so effective at grabbing and holding them, that's the reason why laundering them is pretty ineffective. And it's because of the fact that laundering is ineffective that the reuse issue leads to cross-contamination. And they did do some studies where they looked at mops that had been used for cleaning. They kind of looked at it after each cleaning, after each use and then each subsequent cleaning. And it just kept building up more and more and more until you had very dirty in terms of contaminant load mops, even right after they had been laundered. So both for a variety of reasons, he feels as though in the future we're going to be moving away from microfiber, and that is the standard today in most commercial, not all, but most commercial settings is microfibers. But the single-use microfiber mop is probably, he feels, is going to become the standard, especially in healthcare settings.
One other thing that really surprised me that he said that John stimulated this was that some microfibers actually neutralize disinfectants. And the two disinfectants that can be neutralized are two very commonly used ones, quartz and chlorine bleach. So that was a little scary.
All right, gentlemen, we're right at halftime here, so I think we're going to stop and thank our sponsors. And it kind of worked nicely because it looks like session number 2 is next up on our list. So when we come back, we'll be talking more with John Downey and the Z-Man about this week's CIRI Science Conference.
IAQ Radio Platinum sponsor is John Downey Products, where restoration and abatement contractors shop. Visit them at johndon.com. That's JONDON.com. Gold sponsors are Particles Plus Engineers and Manufacturers of feature-rich particle counters and air quality monitoring instrumentation. Learn more at particlesplus.com. Count on us. Healthy Indoors Magazine, a free online digital magazine for industry professionals and consumers. Subscriptions available at healthyindoors.com. And AEML Laboratories, free FedEx shipping, great pricing, same-day results, and never a rush fee. Learn more at AEMLinc.com. Gray Wolf Sensing Solutions, who use advanced sensor software technology and embedded computers to provide superior environmental test instrumentation. Visit them at wolfsense.com. Association sponsors are the Indoor Air Quality Association, a multidisciplinary organization dedicated to promoting the exchange of indoor environmental information through education and research. Learn more at IAQA.org. And RIA, the Restoration Industry Association, the granddaddy of the restoration industry. Network with leaders. Learn more at restorationindustry.org.
CIRI, the Cleaning Industry Research Institute. See more deeply through science and research. Learn more at ciriscience.org. That's CIRI science.org. All right, we're back, and we're going to have to keep moving here. We've got a lot of great presentations to summarize for you from the recent CIRI conference. Let's go to session number 2, which was titled Down and Dirty Research to Practice, Practice to Research. So John Richter was the first speaker there. I want to get the Z-Man to go ahead and give us some highlights from John Richter's presentation.
He did a very interesting study, and what he was looking at is they wanted to determine whether or not you could clean floors with recycled solution, whether or not that would be feasible. So you're mopping floors, and whether or not you had to throw the water away after a single use, or whether or not it could be recycled, and how many, and if it could be recycled, how many times. And what they did is they created an acceptable standard of soil removal. And what they found was, yes, in a non-critical area, such as, like in a, not in a hospital, but perhaps in a office building or whatever that, that had, hard surface flooring, that the water was recyclable. They ran it through a 100-micron filter for floor cleaning, and found that it was effective, and they could utilize it up to 5 times. So it was something that I think people never really thought about. They measured pH, they measured electrical conductivity, soil left behind. Really, really good study. So I think there is some opportunity for that in the future. I'm not necessarily sure why, unless you're in Abu Dhabi or someplace like that, where you can't get water out of the tap, but there was an interest in it.
Well, even in parts of, the Southwest, water can be very precious. John, anything you'd like to add there?
Yeah, just one thing. I know that we have a lot more to get through, but one quick addition to that was, I think where they feel that there is a benefit is a time benefit. If you can recycle the water, you don't have to be going back and forth, stopping and going back and draining and filling. So you have less water use, or you have less time spent filling and dumping. You also are using less water and less chemical potentially, although there were some questions that were brought up about the chemical usage and whether it continues to have the same effectiveness as it's being reused. That I don't think John had addressed that issue in his research. So it just kind of pointed to the fact that more research is probably going to be helpful in determining how valuable this is.
I sure wish we could figure out why you start out low and then it comes on strong at the end, John. I'm not sure what's going on with the audio, but we'll keep trying. Hey, let's go to the next one. Michael Pinto did a study on remediating fungal contaminated commercial carpet. Cliff, any thoughts?
Yeah, well, what it was is he presented a case study, and what the study demonstrated was the feasibility of remediating fungal contaminated commercial carpet. In this particular situation, it worked well. I think that, I think he was a little bit overzealous in presenting the information because, he went on to say that he thought that this could potentially work in situations where the carpeting was contaminated with sewage. I don't think he realized that there were some experts on carpet and fibers in the audience, and some folks from the IICRC, I think particularly Larry Cooper, who tended to disagree with him. But all in all, Michael came up to me afterwards and he said, Cliff, would you not agree that it's either clean or it's not? And I just told him it depends, because, what's clean in a hospital, what's acceptable for, someone with that's immune compromised is different than, what's clean elsewhere. So I think they're different levels of clean. So perhaps John has some comments on this.
John?
Yeah, just a couple, I hope. One thing is that Michael's talk was based on a paper that we published also this summer in Cleaning Science Quarterly. And I'll be candid in telling you that in Cleaning Science Quarterly, some of that enthusiastic talk was muted because it had to be as a result of some peer review comments. So, it seems as though it is fair to say that there are situations where it can be done, but they are limited situations, maybe more limited than Michael expressed. And maybe, in a 15-minute presentation, maybe you can't get to all of it. But it is significantly limited, although, one point that he made, and quite frankly, this was made during the peer review process with the paper, is that he was talking about, can this be done and be in compliance with the standards? And he looked at the standards and found that there is not per se a prohibition against it or a requirement that the materials be, that carpet be removed if there is mold contamination on it. That is a professional judgment issue. And so without getting into too much, it's also a question that perhaps the people that are writing the standards need to address to make sure we're in good stead in that way, and things are clear. What you said, Cliff, about sewage situations, in all, I would think that because we're not just talking in sewage situations. In fact, we're not talking primarily in sewage situations about mold. We're talking about other kinds of very bad bugs that can be a problem. And I'm not sure that the standards would accept Michael's perspective that in that situation, that would be more something that would fall under the S500. And my understanding is in sewage situation that pretty much most surfaces such as carpet would need to be replaced in those situations. So there needs to be clarification in the standards, which will help guide people like Michael in their future efforts to figure out what we can clean, what we can remediate, and what we have to replace.
Yeah, that's a complicated topic, and it doesn't seem like it's one study or 15-minute presentation is going to answer a lot of the questions. What's contaminated? Is it condition 3? How much is condition 3? Are they HEPA vacuuming first and then using some other product? So it sounds like there's a lot of work to be done in that area, but it's important work. And I think if we find that it can be cleaned, certainly a lot of building owners will be much happier than removing and replacing thousands of square feet of commercial carpet. So I guess it's one of those things that we'll be following as time goes on, and we'll report back to listeners. Let's go to the next presentation from Gene Cole. We just had Gene on not too long ago on IAQ Radio. Dr. Cole, Cliff, give us your thoughts on his presentation.
Well, this was I thought they were all good. This was one of my favorite ones. Gene said that there are in the U.S., there's 67,000 facilities serving 9 million residents, of which 90% or more are 65 years or older. He said that the elder population has a higher susceptibility to disease. He said that facilities are killing patients with their lack of infection control measures. And he told a story. He said, what will happen is they have a patient or they have a resident in one of these homes. The resident develops a fever. They try to treat the fever. They're unsuccessful. They take the patient to the hospital, and then the facility gets a call from the hospital that the patient has succumbed, and that so they have this room in which someone got sick who later died, and they have a waiting list in the facility for that room. And he said it's not unusual for very little or no deep cleaning to be done before they put another occupant into that room. And he said that, he said, number one, the family never asks questions about the patient's demise, and that what's scary is there's no published standard protocols for cleaning. But I the fact that he pointed this out, and today's society, I think it's unforgivable, and we should be doing way, way better.
Interesting. That sounds like an area that's got a lot of potential needs. John, would you like to add anything?
I would just say amen to what Cliff said. That I felt, as he did, it was a very good presentation, and what Gene did more than anything was he pointed out the obvious that we all miss, or I shouldn't say we all miss, but seem to miss. But the fact that these are environments where you have compromised people that are, that's who are in these environments, and yet our standards for cleaning and disinfection are virtually nil. it's up to there are very few standards in place. So as you said, it's something that really need, and they're growing in terms of the need is growing astronomically as the baby boomers like us are retiring and getting old and getting shipped into the these facilities. So now that we're getting close, I want to make sure they're taking better care of them.
Absolutely.
All right. The next presentation was actually by my co-host, the Z-Man, Cliff Zlotnick. Cliff, do you want to summarize real quick for listeners what you taught?
That was pretty simple. What I did was I just demonstrated a practical method to test the odor barrier properties of smoke sealers that are used in fire restoration. So it was pretty simple, down and dirty, and I think that I was able to achieve what I wanted to in the study. I think it can be compared. So I think that was what I wanted to prove.
And you just used people's sense of smell for the comparison. Is that accurate?
Yes, people's sense of smell. I had a panel of 5 people. We took blocks of wood. We contaminated them with a very strong smoky odorant. It was actually an essential oil made from burnt wood. Very, very strong, very extreme test. And, we were able to, to get a clear winner. One product outperformed the other.
And we'll talk more about that at this year's Healthy Buildings Summit 2019 at Seven Springs, October 16 to 18. Let's go. Before we go, John, anything you want to add on Cliff's presentation?
No, it was a good presentation. It's kind of one of the things that I'd really like to see CIRI and the industry develop more. That and when you go to the next presentation, which is kind of similar, kind of basic practical research that not only has to, not research that has to be done by scientists, but practical things that people can do for themselves to give them an idea. And it's one of the things that with CIRI we really want to start emphasizing and finding ways to promote and develop in the industries that we serve.
All right, let's move on. We're going to run out of time here, folks. We've got the next one is a panel moderated by Ralph Moon, Dr. Moon, practical and effective uses of measurements of cleaning effectiveness. Started with Peter Edelstein, commercial carpet cleaner from Brazil. That sounds interesting, Cliff.
He was. I happened to be there for the aha moment. I was speaking with John and Dr. Spivak at the CIRI booth at the ISSA show, and all of a sudden this young, handsome gentleman kind of shows up, and he has a IICRC patch on his shirt, and it turned out that he's a professional commercial carpet cleaner who has very, very high-end clientele commercially, Apple and Amazon and companies like that he cleans for down in Brazil. And he uses ATP sampling of carpet to prove to the customers that the carpeting is clean, and he can actually prove how clean it is. He guarantees a 70% improvement in the ATP readings before and after cleaning. But I mean, his English is a lot more it's much better than my Portuguese, and it's just great that somebody can communicate with an audience. And I mean, speaking of communication, there was an attendee from Japan, and this person was provided with an interpreter at the CIRI conference. So, there was I guess someone who will remain nameless who provided that service. And it was great to have a woman in a booth, and she would instantly translate stuff into Japanese. So wow. Very impressive.
Let's go on to Chris Rosnowski. Unless, John, do you have anything you wanted to add on the last one?
No, all right. I pretty much same thing I'd say with Peter as I said with Cliff. Good, useful, practical research.
All right. Chris Rosnowski, Cliff.
Joe, on our show, over the past 10 or 12 years, we've discussed ozone on a number of occasions. We've discussed the hydroxyl radicals, and, we had asked some questions, and no one really seemed to answer the questions of, whether or not these treatments could react adversely with environments. And Chris is in Canada, and he talked about two specific situations in which homes suffered small fires. The damage would have been $100,000 or less. And in both of these situations, hydroxyls, ozone, were utilized and made the homes toxic to the point that the homeowners cannot occupy them, and that they're going to end up being bulldozed. So claims that could have been settled for under $100,000 are now being settled for greater than $1 million in both situations.
Interesting. Let's go to another. I've got one more here, or two more in that panel. Jeff Merrihew.
This fellow works for Janitronics, and what he talked about was when a decision was made to include ATP in Janitronics commercial cleaning, the reaction of the staff and the employees. Some people really embraced it. They wanted to sample everything. And they said the other group didn't want to sample anything. And they had to figure out exactly what to sample and how to sample it and how to implement it. And they encountered confusion in using it. And he explained how they solved all the problems. But it's served them extremely well, and it's been a great differentiator. Their embracing of that technology has put them way ahead of their competitors.
John, anything you'd like to add?
Well, he did mention that they lost one account as a result of ATP testing because the hospital's methodology for using it was way off of what was intended. But once they got it in their heads that their measurements were way higher than what Janitronics were, they really weren't able to save that particular account. So you also pointed out, that it's one of those things that can be very useful, but you got to be careful and know how you're using it in order for it to be effective in communicating cleaning effectiveness to your customers.
Well, let me just explain what happened. When Janitronics was using the ATP, they would use a little template, and they would be sampling a very small area of consistent size for comparison. When the hospital did it, they would rub it all over big sections of walls and in different rooms and so on and so forth. So it really was not a fair comparison.
All right, we've got one more from that session. Andrew Meyer. Cliff, let's get your summary, and then we'll get John's thoughts on it.
Sure. In pharmaceutical plants, they use something which is called good manufacturing process or practice, and this requires that the cleaning be validated. And the FDA, this cleaning was normally validated with wipe tests. And now what's required is the FDA requires that a risk-based calculation actually be made, taking into account residues of cleaning products, and probably more importantly, residues of drugs, active ingredients, or inactive ingredients that could be left in a manufacturing tank or vessel after cleaning. So the government's worried about this cross-contamination, and it's a very, very complex process. So, there's really, really a lot to it. John?
John, anything you'd like to add?
No, I think Cliff did better than I possibly could have on that. That one was.
We've got two more sessions, gents, and we're running a little short on time. I'm fine. I could stay as long as you want, or we could maybe break this into 2 shows. I just want to get your thoughts.
Up to you, John.
John?
I feel the same way. There's actually 3 more sessions, a total of, I think probably 11 more, 10 or 11 more presenters. There's sessions 4, 5, and 6. So
Do you stick around, John, or do you have to run?
I can, I mean, if you want to go for it and go ahead and finish it today, I'm okay with that.
Well,
Okay.
I was thinking we could replay this as part 2 when we take our summer break as well, and then we could just get her done today and have one in the can.
I'm okay with that too.
All right. Before we do that, though, let's go to the roundup for this first segment, and we're going to bring in the Restoration Industry's Global Watchdog, Pete Consigli. I hope we've got you, Pete. Hey, Pete.
Hey guys, can you hear me?
Yeah,
We can.
Pete, got a couple
Yeah.
thoughts?
So, hey Joe, that this last panel you just talked about, I was the moderator for the ATP. Ralph Moon had done the panel 2, the one before that. I wound up doing 2 panels, this one and the panel 5. I think John did 4, and then I think Steve Spivak did the wrap-up panel. If I agree that there's too much information here to cover in one show, it really is a 2-part show if you want to do it justice. You know, I think the evaluations that Cliff's been doing are fabulous, and you know, John's been kind of dovetailing off of that. A lot of really important information. So, you know, Cliff, I'm sure probably already has the blog, you know, almost done because you know, he took copious notes, and that's what's allowing him to you know, to do the dialogue on the show. The comments that I have, and this kind of is going to, you know, maybe lend to a couple of the follow-up panels that we're talking about. I was 2 big key messages that I got out of the event. The importance of creating awareness with the general public and all the customers per se of the cleaning industry, be it property owners, insurance companies, you know, the people who manage all the facilities and the hospitals and the schools and all this, is to really impress upon them the importance of cleaning, things validated through the research because of these superbugs, which are building resistance at alarming rates. And you know, and then the new next thing comes along, which Greg Whiteley talked about. And so I think it's an important message, you know, and in my mind, this is something I think that falls in under this kind of advocacy movement that's starting to bubble up. You know, a lot of the essence of the advocacy really starts with issues around the software programs and the pricing and the resistance from the TPAs. But what are the roots of all that? The roots of that is disagreement in scope of work. And how do you validate scope of work? Well, through the standards. Well, how do you evaluate the standards? Through the research, by asking the questions and then having factual information that can validate scope, that validates the standards, that then filters down, and this is the process. So in my mind, that falls under the advocacy umbrella. The other thing that I found is the passion and the commitment that these residential house cleaners have is really something. You know, they tend to be, I guess, in certain areas, maybe they deal in more of the high-end residential type cleaning or cleaning for people that have, you know, asthma or some other kind of, you know, medical affliction that they need more detailed cleaning. And, you know, you've had shows in the past and that, Dave Mason on his SaniClean process and others that have addressed that. But I didn't realize it until I, you know, listened to David Geiser talk, who he's kind of, I see him as my counterpart for that segment of the industry, the way I advocate for restorers. And he cares so much about the work that they do, and the people who do that work care so much about their customers. I mean, it was so obvious, and they, it's a calling for these guys. And this is why I suggested that they have a very interesting story, and I think it'd be worthy of a show. We were talking kind of before we logged on. So to me, that was a big, and that was reinforced by the one gentleman from the International Housekeepers, Alan, and then there's Bill McGarvey, McGravy or McGarvey. Both of them, along with David, talked about the fact that these cleaners have no respect. They're looked down upon. They have no self. They feel like, nobody gives them any self-worth. And that's an important part of their job, of the work they do to raise that image. And, in many ways, the restoration industry have those same issues. So there's a connection there. That kind of reigned through, message through a number of those panels. And it kind of jumped off the screen at me. So anyway, those are my thoughts. I think there's more work to be done. I think John did a very impressive job of putting this together. With the Spivak's idea and the SAC committee, and there was I think there's going to be a really an important and powerful evaluation of. We got tons of evaluations in. That came in. I know John and his staff, they need to go through those, discern them, and then, make decisions of how they want CIRI to move forward in the future and what kind of programs and, how can they effectively, get more people engaged, as they start to build their membership categories and everything. And, of course, Cliff, myself, and the show and others, we're going to help support them because, we believe in those things. We think it's important work for the industry. So anyway, that's my report as I'm carefully following the law, going down the Interstate 80, heading to the Big Apple on my summer camp road trip. I'll see you at summer camp, boys. And I'm following the law, total hands-free on my iPhone, and I got my seatbelt synced in. Back to you, Joe.
Thank you, Pete. Always appreciated. All right. This is Radio Joe Hughes saying thank you so much to my co-host, the Z-Man, Cliff Zlotnick, and, of course, our guest for today, John Downey. I know you are probably going to sleep well this weekend after all the hard work of preparing for a conference, especially a science-based conference. Putting cleaning and science together has been, I think it's imperative that if the industry is going to continue to move forward and continue to profit, we're going to have to combine science with cleaning and, of course, health. So I appreciate both of you taking the time to join us today. And, of course, John Faith. John, you got to have faith at the controls. I want to thank Pete, the restoration industry's global watchdog, Consigli, for also joining us for the first half of the show. This is Radio Joe Hughes saying we'll see you next Friday at noon for the next episode of IAQ Radio Plus.
For IAQ Radio, I'm Spike Reed saying thanks for listening.